Welcome back to Seamless Xtra as we continue to explore the latest trends and innovations in the world of digital commerce.
Hi, Francis. Welcome to Seamless Extra. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Hi, Micah. Thanks for having me.
Good. Francis, just for our viewers, I was wondering whether you can just give a quick introduction about yourself and Jumia Group.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Francis. I'm the CEO of Jumia Group, which is the leading Pan-African e-commerce platform. Jumia is operating across 11 countries in Africa. It's a very tailored business model for the African continent and for African consumers. 100% of our consumers are in Africa. We're focused and committed to the continent. We've built this business as a marketplace that's enabled by our own logistics and our own payment systems, which makes a whole ecosystem that's very specific to Jumia.
Now, let's go on our first question. I was wondering, how can e-commerce businesses serve the specific needs of very diverse consumers and not just copying your standard e-commerce recipes?
So I think e-commerce is one easy word, but behind this word, there's a very, very diverse industry. There's one basic common denominator, which is, well, all companies selling something via some online platform. But then the industry is so diverse because it's selling any kind of product in any kind of market to very different customers with very different behaviors, very different purchasing power, tastes, and everything. So e-commerce is actually a very, very broad topic. And when we think of copy-pasting recipes, well, we're actually thinking of the big names. Usually, we're thinking Alibaba or Amazon, but they're just a part of the landscape of e-commerce. And if you look around, it's thousands of very, very different business models. In our case, for Jumia in Africa, we've developed a business model that's very, very different from what you may have in mind thinking of the big names. We've adapted to very different market contexts. We've adapted to different purchasing power. We've adapted to different supply. We've adapted to very different ways, to reach out and communicate with customers. So there's actually no standard blueprint or playbook for e-commerce across the world. And I think it's an industry that's changing all the time. It's so competitive and so fast-paced because there's so much innovation coming from tech that's enabling the business, that this industry is being reshaped pretty much on a yearly basis, right? You have now big players that everyone's discovering across the world, for example, that were a bit below the radar a few years back. But the landscape is changing extremely fast because it's very diverse, because there are very different consumer tastes, and anyone who gets a better recipe to adapt to specific segments can take over part of the market. So yeah, there's no one size fits all. There's no standard recipe for e-commerce, definitely.
Yes, and what would you say you can give the advice for businesses who would really like to embrace wherever they are, their presence, like for each customer specification, for each different type of customers, because obviously customer demands are also forever changing within the landscape. So how would you say businesses can keep up to that demand and really tailor to it?
It's difficult. I mean, we've had this case at Jumia. I mean, over the past decade, we've been keeping up and adapting to consumer demand. It's very tough because, well, in many instances, you build a business and then you realize that consumer demand, consumer tastes are changing. So you have to be able to rebuild, I mean, destroy and rebuild, which for managers is a very complicated case, right? You build something quite complex with lots of tech, lots of infrastructure, logistics, and so on. And you need to be able to realize, like 1 year later, that, well, consumer demand is a bit different and we're not exactly matching what people want. And you need to be able to make very tough decisions because you have to destroy a bit of what you've built and be able to rebuild in a way that fits better the needs of your customers, which makes it a very challenging business, I think, for managers and leaders, because you need to be willing and able to change all the time. You cannot hold on to what you've built 5 years ago. It's irrelevant today.
Yes, yeah.
And so that's personally challenging for all leaders in the industry.
So that's a great advice. It's basically going with the flow and going where the consumer is heading to as well. You can't just, stay still in one strategy. You have to forever evolve. And now you've mentioned also about tech and obviously around infrastructure. And what would you say the best way of establishing a good global or regional interconnectivity to foster cross-border trade?
Well, there's no great recipe for that. I mean, Jumia is operating only in Africa across these 11 markets. And well, I can tell you that the interconnectivity is complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated. It depends on many, many different players. It depends a lot on the regulatory setup that we have in our markets. I think it's been made relatively simple across many markets. Right, it's relatively easy to send goods to the US or to the Schengen area in Europe with pretty standard procedures with customs and relatively simple entry. In other jurisdictions, in other regions of the world, well, we have to deal with more fragmented markets that are not so, I mean, where regulation has not been designed to make it easy for e-commerce to get in, especially from the outside. With lots of differences from one market to the next, with lots of relatively small and fragmented markets and lots of differences between each other. So it's a big puzzle. I mean, it's a bit of a challenge, definitely. Well, I cannot clearly answer because there's no clear recipe. The thing is to find markets where you can actually operate and build the right value proposition for consumers and add volumes to the supply chain. But I mean, at least where we Jumia operate, the lack of one single framework, especially, I mean, particularly on the regulatory side, is a big challenge, of course.
How important is innovation in making sure that you gain success within your specific market?
So innovation is I was having discussions with my managers even yesterday about that. It's always a balance, right? When you're running a company that's operating across several markets, that does payments, logistics, marketplace, and so on, you have to find the right balance between innovation and some level of standardization and, well, rigorous operations. So it cannot be a free-for-all where you're experimenting as you wish, because, well, there are rules and packages need to be delivered in a compliant and efficient way. So we're trying to make sure that we get the basics stable and enforced across the company and leave the right amount of space so leaders in each country, in each different market, can innovate at their scale in a way that will be, I mean, that we will be able to pick up to replicate across the other countries. Whatever cannot be scaled should not be experimented. And with that, I mean, it's a very fine line for me as a CEO. It's a challenge trying to leave to my leaders and managers to give them the right framework that needs to be abided by, while giving enough room for innovation and experimentation. And Jumia as a company has been built through experimentation, through trial and error, I may say, which enabled us to find lots of amazing things and to serve our African consumers way better than than if we had come to Africa with a standard playbook that you mentioned earlier. So we've been experimenting in many topics, not only in tech, by the way. We're experimenting in very low-tech topics that make us much more relevant to our consumers. I mean, lately, one of our best marketing channels is printing catalogs, for example. That's very low-tech. I mean, that's no tech at all. But it's actually a way of addressing very cost-conscious customers living outside of the big cities with poor connectivity. And that kind of innovation happened at the scale of one country, then was rolled out across all the countries at Jumia. So that's why it's important to leave some room and make sure that, well, you don't smother innovation because you need to standardize and you need to reduce risk.
Yeah, that's great. I think, from just what I've learned from just speaking to you at the moment, I think, innovation sounds like you always have to go with technology or like digital, but you always come back to what your consumer needs. Like what you said, printing catalogs, you'd think that that's not digital like anymore. Everyone's
Not
like going
much.
online, mobile apps. But if it does work within your specific consumer market, then that's the way you should innovate. It doesn't mean the
Yeah.
digital,
Yeah, and
way.
even for e-commerce, I mean, innovation in e-commerce, I mean, of course, a lot of it is enabled by tech and better product. That's
Yes, of course.
obvious. But in our emerging markets, there can be lots of innovation coming from low tech or no tech that can be very impactful for consumers who are not all yet shopping online, obviously.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, I mean, Francis, me and you, I will see you at Seamless on the 14th and the 16th of May at Dubai World Trade Center. And you will be joining us for the keynote panel around transformational leadership in the digital age. Maybe you can tell the audience to why they should be excited about this and what they can learn from you.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity, and Seamless is a great event and great opportunity to meet leaders in tech and e-commerce from across the world, particularly from emerging markets, Dubai being very well positioned to get all of us there. So I'm very much looking forward to meeting peers and other leaders in our field. I think, well, what I can bring or what Jumia can bring in terms of learning at the event. Well, Jumia is an eventful story with ups and downs. It's a story of resilience and extraordinary adaptability through innovation. Even, I mean, quite recently, we completely redesigned and remodeled the company with a massive turnaround. And I mean, the story of Jumia is what we discussed before. You have to innovate and change all the time because this business is so competitive. Technology is evolving so fast. Consumers are changing faster than ever as well. So, well, it's a story of constant experimentation and innovation, and also a story of tough decisions. What we
Of
built
course,
a
yeah.
few years back, I mean, you cannot keep forever what you built even a few years back or a few months back. Yeah, it's a beautiful story with lots of change and tough times as well. But that's the price to pay if you want to succeed in e-commerce.
Of course. I mean, we're excited to have you. We're excited to hear the Jumia story. And so thank you, Francis, for joining the Seamless Extra interview today.
Thank you, Micah. Looking forward to meeting you at Seamless.